Hello, everyone, and welcome to the University of Rhode Island Computer Science and Statistics. In today's lesson, we are going to continue talking about managing disks and partitions in our Linux server, part 2. So, in this lesson, we're going to learn how to actually create an extended partition using our disk drives and our Linux OS. So, right now, here I am using my primary drive is DEV/SDA1 with the asterisk, which shows me the boot, and I know that SDA1 is what my primary boot is. One of the things you definitely want to do is you want to shut down your Linux machine. And the reason you want to shut down your Linux machine is because we want to create a backup of our Linux system. And the reason we're going to do that is because you want to make sure that you have a backup in case if you were to make a mistake or accidentally delete the master boot record where your Linux file or your Linux operating system is housed, because once that's deleted or destroyed, you will not be able to use your Linux OS. You will have to reinstall it in order to launch it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to snapshot, and I'm going to select take a snapshot. And I'm going to name this clean install of Linux server. And I can add a description of what I'm doing. So backup of a newly installed Linux server. Again, it's really up to you in regards to what you want to name this. Since I already have one called Linux server, I'm going to write 1.1 and I'm going to take a snapshot. So if I was to take a look at what my snapshot is, I could right click, go to snapshot and select snapshot manager. And you'll notice that I have two snapshots that I took, right? A clean install backup and another one, 1.1. They're both the same thing. But one of the good things I can do with my snapshot is I can clone it. I can take another snapshot of that snapshot. I can auto protect it. I can even create a backup of that snapshot if I wanted to. So I definitely highly recommend that you take a snapshot of your Linux server once you fully have installed and got it up and running. Okay. Another thing that we did is we also expanded our Linux drive. So you want to make sure that you've expanded it from the 20 typical installation that we did in the beginning to 50, which we covered in the last lecture. However, once you take a snapshot of your Linux drive, you will not be able to expand it or make the hard drive any bigger because the backup is going to be built on the notion that you're using the same amount of gigs that you originally had in your system. So from here, I'm going to launch my Linux server. Okay. And I am going to now start partitioning my hard disk in Linux. So I'm going to log in to my system, clear my screen, and I'm going to log in as a root or sudo user so that way I don't have to keep doing sudo because then the sudo user is really useful because it really prompts you before you run any command. So that way you're not running any command without thinking about the consequences of what that command may cause. But in this case, I'm going to just do sudo su because I kind of have a good sense of the commands that I want to run and I just want to run through them. Okay, so again, I'm going to go back to fdisk -l, and I am going to notice that all of my hard drives are going to display. And again, I notice that I have one main hard drive with my Linux software on it. Okay, so one of the other things that we did is we're going to download the gdisk. So we're going to do apt-get install, and you want to definitely install gdisk. Okay, gdisk is another Linux utility tool that I introduced you to in the previous lecture. It really allows you to manage hard drives and disk in your Linux system. As you can tell, I've already downloaded it. So if I was to do gdisk, gdisk -l /dev/sda, you will notice that I would get information about my main drive that I currently have. I can also just do gdisk -l, and it would show me, well, let's do gdisk /dev/sda. You will notice that it will show me that I have one primary MBR. If I was to do question mark, it will basically tell me what my options are using the gdisk utility, right? So if I was to press I, it would show me detailed information on my partition, which is, it's showing me here. So it's showing me that my partition is using up 20 gigs out of my 50, and that my first sector is only really using about 1.2 kilobytes, and my last sector is using the 20. I have a partition size of 20 gigabyte. And then if I was to write P, I could print a partition table, and it shows me exactly what my partition table look like. And the code that's associated with the primary drive is code 8300. All right. And I can write Q to quit out of that gdisk utility. So we're actually going to use the fdisk utility to create a new partition for our Linux server. So I'm going to write fdisk slash dev slash sda, and then it will welcome me to the Linux utility tool. So the Linux utility tool is similar to your gdisk tool, except that it really depends on which tool you want to use to partition your hard drive. From here, I can write M for help to get a list of the possible commands that I can run, but I'm just going to write N, and it's going to give me an option of the hard disk that I can partition based on my primary drive. So my options are I can create another primary drive or an extended drive. By default, if your Linux system still uses the old BIOS concept, you can create 4 primary drive. In my case, you notice that 3 are free, 1 is already being utilized because I installed my Linux OS. When I did do that, it took up one of the primary drive to load the system. And the way BIOS works is BIOS stands for Basic Input Output System. It will do a POST, which is a power on self test. It will test to make sure that everything works. Once everything works, it will run through my hard drive to look for the OS, and then it will load it into the boot and then launch the OS. Most new systems no longer use that because it's really time consuming and takes a while. Okay, so now that I'm here, without going too much into detail about the booting process of an OS, I can create a primary or an extended drive. So I'm going to create a primary drive, and I'm going to write P. And you're going to notice that the only partition number options that I have are 2 through 4. The reason the options are only 2 through 4 is because 1 is already utilized for SDA1, and that is what my main OS is already loaded on. So I'm going to use 2 as the default drive number. My first sector, it's showing me, is going to use a little bit over 4 gigs. Press enter. Then my last sector, it's showing me can use over 10. So I'm going to specify what I want. So I'm going to do a plus sign. I'm going to do 5 GB because I only wanted to use 5 gigabyte. And then it's going to show me that it created a new partition, 2 of type Linux and of size 4.7 gigabyte. I'm going to write W to write that partition. And I'm going to do an fdisk -L to list my disk options. So you will notice now with the ID 83, which stands for primary, I now have 2 hard disks that are primary disk, right? My SDA1 followed by the asterisk, which is what is my which is what my boot options use to load my OS. And then it has 20 gig, and then my SDA2, which is my second primary disk, which uses 4.7 gigabytes in my Linux operating system. All right, so I'm going to clear my screen just to clear it, and then I can do an fdisk -L slash dev slash sda2 to get a little bit more detail about my sectors if I really wanted them. And you'll notice that I have a bunch of information here about my options for SDA2, but I'm going to clear it. Again, you notice I have a 32 gigabytes that's available for extended, and then 100 meg on my Linux for the 83, and then 29.9. So really, this gives you a good sense of what you have available. So I'm going to clear it, and I'm just going to do an fdisk -L. And this time, I'm actually going to create an extended drive so you can see the difference between the two. So I'm going to do an fdisk, and I'm going to use my SDA2. So I'm going to take the primary hard drive that I created for SDA2, and I'm going to create an extended drive from that SDA2. So I'm going to do fdisk /dev slash SDA2, and then I'm going to follow the same option by writing N, and then it's going to show me that no free sectors are available. Okay, so it's saying that all space for primary partition is in use. Adding logical 7 partition, no free sectors are available. So it's basically saying to me that I can't create it. So I'm going to quit. All right. and I'm going to clear my screen. Then I'm going to do fdisk/dev/sda. I'm going to write new, and then it's going to show me that I have two primary drives that have been created. So what it's showing me here is that my primary drive, when I created it, based on the 5 gigs is being utilized by my primary drive, so I can't really do much to it. But I do have available space on my main hard drive, given that it's using 50 gigabytes, because 20 is for my first. I use 5 for my second. So I'm going to write E, okay, and it's going to say what would I like, partition number would I like to assign to this extended drive from my SDA. I'm going to just give it a default of 3. I'm going to accept the first sector. And then the last sector, I'm only going to make it 100 megs because it is an extended drive. And I just want to save some simple files on it. And you will notice that I created a new partition 3 of type extended. I'm going to write it. So the partition table has been altered, syncing disk. So you want to give it a while so the disk can sync. Then I'm going to clear my screen. I'm going to do fdisk -L. And you will notice that I have created 3 partitions now, right? SDA1 and SDA2 are both primary partitions, and SDA3 is extended partition. Okay, so if I wanted to, I can write information to it. I can assign users access to those partitions. I can grant users permissions to save files or access files that are on those partitions, right? Partitions. You definitely want to make sure you limit user access, because as the partitions grow, you want to make sure that you're not going to run into issues with the partitions becoming too big, where it can damage your main OS. So now that I have this, I'm going to do fdisk /dev/sda, because now I want to delete these partitions, because I no longer really need them. I created them just to give users access, but we no longer need them. We're moving on to something else. I want to free up the space, so I'm going to use the D option to delete. Then it's going to ask me which partition number would I like to delete, 1, 2, or 3, right? And you definitely never want to delete 1, because 1 is where you have your asterisks here, which is where your main hard drive currently resides, right? Your main OS. So never, ever, ever delete 1, because if you do, you'll delete your OS. So we're going to delete 3, all right? And you're going to notice partition 3 has been deleted. I'm going to write it. It's going to sync it to the disk. So now if I was to do, let me clear my screen. So now if I was to do an fdisk -L, you will notice that I only have 2 partitions available, 2 primary partitions. I no longer have an extended partition available. If I wanted to, I could delete SDA2 and continue. Definitely never delete 1, because 1 is where your primary OS resides or lies, and you definitely never want to delete that. So that is how you create partitions using the fdisk in Linux. Again, you could do the same thing using gdisk. Just to show you, you would do gdisk /dev/sda, and then it would take you through the same step, question mark. So how do I create a new partition table? I could print my partition table just to get a good sense of it, right? But if I were to create a new one, add a new partition, you notice that it says N. I could just do N, same philosophy as fdisk, and then it would ask me what kind of partition number would I like to assign it. But we're not going to create anything. So I just wanted to show you how both tools essentially allow you to accomplish and do the same exact thing. So that is how you create partition tables, primary partitions and extended partitions, using your Linux server.